So let's get started. So welcome everyone to this month's ZEISS Conversations. We're here with a couple of cinematographers today that have put together a rather enjoyable piece of content of an episodic to talk about. I don't want to preface too much, but I got hooked, man. I got into that first that teaser pilot that the CW put out, and I need to see more now. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. But Anna, if you want to introduce our guest, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Today for our special guest, we have Glenn Brown with us, who is joining from the Atlanta area. So he shot the pilot of the show, and then Abraham Martinez as well. So a big thank you to both of you guys for joining today. And then from the ZEISS team, I'm Anna Schmidt, and then Tony Wisniewski and David Warner is also with us. Cool. So we have a couple of awesome BTS images too that you guys had shared with us, and we'll show you a couple of stills. We're going to talk mainly about 61st Street, but I really want to hear a bit about your backgrounds as well. If Glenn, if you could start and talk to us a little bit about how you got started in the camera department and who some of your mentors were.
Yeah, I mean, I come from nepotism. Like, my sister was a hairdresser, my brother is a teamster, and we have a different father, but he was a producer for the Waltons. And so my sister met Jimmy Merrill on Dances with Wolves, who's another Steadicam operator, director of photography now. And I was 12 at the time, and he, from age 12, until I was like 22, working with him on Titanic, I followed him around, like as his camera, and then eventually made me a camera assistant and became a focus puller. I slowly moved up the ranks, and and that's where I even met Abe, was on Ali, from Michael Mann, from working with Jimmy, like we've all I came up camera assistants along with Abe. So that's how like my beginning had started, and then like it's just a slow, 20 or almost 30-year progression, from one job to the next until you finally become a cameraman, which is like, I guess, your ultimate goal at some point, or at least my goal was.
Yeah, and can you talk about some of your favorite projects that you worked on over the years, or like a couple of titles from your past that where you felt like you learned a lot about the process and kind of shaped who you are as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was really lucky to work with Jimmy because, like the Titanic was literally like one of my first, real shows in the Union. And I was Jim Cameron's like personal camera assistant. So like I did all this, like, because everyone was afraid of him because he can be, pretty overbearing. He's like 6'4", and he's pretty loud, and he's, can be a tyrant. But like, whatever reason, we got along. So like, that was my introduction of like, I thought this is how all movies are made, because then we went from that to working with Michael Mann, who's, he's the opposite in height, but just as much as intensity, so like I was able to learn from him. And then I went from Michael to working with Steven Soderbergh, which is the complete opposite, like it's just him and the camera. The set is completely quiet, he's the nicest, and was his personal camera assistant. So like I was able to learn from some of the best directors in the business. And along that line, like I worked for Dante Spinati, who's been nominated, for Academy Award, Russell Carpenter, we won the Academy Award. So like I've been able to see different cameramen and, being a camera assistant, working, luckily, being able to work on these big shows and different directors, like, you just take it all in. It's hard not to.
Yeah, and I also want to throw it over to Abraham, if you could tell us about your background a bit and maybe share a couple of projects that you're really proud of that you worked on. We'd like to hear a bit more about your background as well.
My background is very similar to Glenn as far as coming up through the camera department. But my journey started, I didn't know anybody. I was in film school at University of North Texas. And I got really lucky to be a driver for a camera grip electric house called MPS in Dallas, Texas. And when I wasn't delivering Fisher dollies and gear, I would go back. I always wanted to be in the camera department. In the 8th grade, I started shooting film and darkroom. And by my senior year, I knew I wanted to be a camera person. So I already was going to film school and taking a lot of world cinema. I wasn't really taking any production classes yet because just already in my junior year in college, I was already working professionally in the Dallas market, and that's what got me into mobile production service. So when I wasn't delivering as a van driver, I would go back, and I think Brother P-Touch just barely came out, like mid-90s, and I would go back there and organize and label all the filters. So that was my introductory to glass. And then it was a smaller house. So if anyone's looking into getting into camera department, I highly recommend also smaller rental houses. We were very much a ZEISS area house. And Joe Loomis, who was very much a mentor of mine in the very beginning, really was my foundation to lensing. We would change shims and flanges, and I'd do light repairs on magazines. But I would spend hours and hours of throwing lenses up on the projector. Super speeds, ZEISS super speeds, standard speeds, macros. So after so much repetition, I got very familiar with lenses. And I think after that, I went to CinemaVision, which used to be FMBCO in New York City. And then there too was also more of the same of really getting into lenses and being familiar with equipment. So it made me very, very strong in terms of knowing the gear. But kind of where Glenn and I have a bridge that was really in terms of mentor was Gary J. Also. Gary J lived in Dallas, and he was kind of like worked a lot with Dante Spinotti, and I was his prep tech while Gary was the first AC, but starting to operate. And to me, it's always great to meet mentors who are in the transition zone, much like how Glenn mentioned that we've come up to the department, and you're always kind of looking at the one job ahead of you. So from film loader to second to first to operator and so on. And I think that's a journey of a collaboration of closeness that carries over when you're working with directors and producers and as a DP. And so eventually we would team up again on Ali. I would meet Glenn on that shoot. And I think there was a lot of foundational stuff that I've got to learn from him and glean from him, having different points of view in the camera department. And same thing, Glenn is very much a mentor of mine as well, just seconding for him as a first. And I actually helped with him when he was building his reel a long time ago, like 20 years ago. So it's been quite a journey having been part of that team. And the Michael Mann on Ali was the transition to digital. And I think that was very informative for me. And another game changer for me was when Glenn was working with Shane Hurlbut. And it was around the time we were still shooting film, but Shane had converted over to doing a lot of Canon work with Michael Svitek and Darren Necessary. So I was able to get more hands-on approach to the digital space. So it's been an interesting journey how even my partnership with Glenn has been carried over, decades, even though we might've been in different camera teams later on. So I worked on Spider-Man 3, Fast and Furious, which were very much the opposite of what Michael Mann would do in terms of VFX. So, and I'm finding myself more in that place currently with video walls, LED walls, green screen, having lots of gear, in the back lot with green screen. So I feel like that's kind of a familiar ground, having been through Spider-Man 3 as an assistant on with Bill Pope. Also worked when Fast and Furious was a very interesting thing for me because I started shooting around that time, 2008, and I loved it because we did do a lot of car work, VFX, but we also did a lot of practical locations. And Amir Mokri, it was such a great thing to shadow him every day at the practical locations, whereas Spider-Man 3 was a lot of green screen and not so practical at times. So for me, I was constantly trying to glean what I can. And around that time, around Spider-Man 3, I started going to dailies, film dailies. And I think that's really where I started really diving in even more, another layer of lenses and filmmaking, because it was so hands-on on film. You shoot, and the very next day you watch projected dailies, either at the studio or a trailer. So back then in the film days, we were able to do that. And it was always an open door with Amir Morkery, Bill Pope, just going back there to see our day's work as opposed to waiting for the DVD or the movie to come out.
And
Nice.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
was just, I was just going to say, you've seen a lot of equipment and opportunity change in the abilities of the equipment to, from film through digital. Now you're talking about green screens. Do you see that, having viewed all of that, is there one genre or one type of production that really stands out to you as something, as more of a creative, more of a way to create, or one that you prefer over the other? Or is it really given to, where the creative team is taking the production?
I feel like it's a constant state of learning. I think right now where it's led me to be in a virtual space and to really think not just where the camera is virtually, but also where the lights are. And I felt like even in the film, when we were doing film and knowing lenses and the characteristics of lenses, I think a lot of what I felt it was to grow to the next level is learning people who weren't necessarily DP. So say for instance, I did like 2 months on Django Unchained on a B camera, Quentin's camera, and we had some camera department transitions, and I think we had like 60 plus lenses, and being a part when the first AC is shifting over, it's like you get to really learn how they diagnose or how they test anamorphic lenses, and to see it on a projector. So it's always, I think, Gregor, John Connor, like having assisted with so many people who work with lenses, it was very informative, because I feel like even some of that translation has helped maybe like the legacy lenses that were like older and the characteristics that they are still carrying over to the place where we're talking about putting the data into certain software. And I think with Blender and Houdini and all these other programs that you can have off the market, you can really start learning more and growth. So I felt there was always in the beginning a resistance in terms, because I think the goal was to work on shows that had more practical lighting. That's why I mentioned Amir Morkery, because we'll be shooting on the east side in LA. But then you go into do VFX, a green screen work on whatever, Hancock or whatever it may be. There was like a big leap into making things feel natural and having realism. And I feel like that seems to me to be where my heart is to try to make it feel real or truthfulness. And I think every project is one way or the other, whether if it's just a domestic on location shoot where VFX. So I think to me the pendulum is really switching for us in cinematography, is try to make it feel real and truthful, or trying to sell the world that you're building even.
Nice. I like that. Thank you.
And Glenn, I want to ask you a question next about creating the look for this show, but I also want to ask about how this project came to you, 61st Street. What was your relationship with the director and the team that reached out to you for this?
Yeah, the producer, Jeff, I had worked for on Halt Catch Fire. Like we did 4 seasons together, and then we did a season of Lodge 49, and then he actually moved me up to cameraman on the second season of Lodge 49. So he, from that point on, he kind of just took me everywhere, like he went. So like we went to did a show in Philadelphia, and then he got 61st Street. So then, he brought me along to 61st Street. That's how I got the job. And then the director of the pilot, Marta Cunningham, we did work together in Philadelphia. And we became friends on that show. Like immediately we became friends. So like, and because of COVID, we were supposed to start the show. We were in, like Abe and I both had gotten it, like we had actually, picked the camera package, and we were going to shoot it. And then we had a year from a week before I was supposed to leave. And then a year later I left, my house to go work on this show. But in that time, as far as picking the gear, I went to Keslow, before COVID, and Greg, who works at Keslow, he's the Keslow manager. He's like, hey, there's these new lenses, these ZEISS, Supreme Radiances, and he's like, I love them, they're beautiful. And I'm like, I don't know, I like the older, like, I don't know if this is what I want. Like, I don't know if this is kind of a, maybe it's an older look show, because we wanted, Abe and I wanted the South Side to look, have a look to it, like, and it looked more gritty, and more warm tones, and like these lenses could tend to be blue, so like, I didn't know if they were the right lenses, but then Dana Gonzalez, who's a really good friend of mine, who is another person that I came up with. We were camera assistants and operators together, and he was shooting Fargo. And he said, and Paul Cameron's another DP, and they're like, these are the best lenses for African American people. He's like, I'm shooting Fargo in Chicago right now. He's like, and I love them. And I'm like, okay, so that's what gave us the thing. So we literally took his complete camera package, his cameras and his lenses, and brought them over to our show. Really, it was from Dana's, just like letting us know how great these lenses are. So, like that was the start. And then as soon as we started doing the tests with them, and I took a Tobacco 2 and a Tobacco 1, which is something I'd use with Soderbergh on Traffic. And that, that took the blue, made them really warm. And then, like, for whatever reason, it worked so well on their skin tone. Like, to me, it gave it the whole look of the show. And then if we took them out, we did a cooler look for the police. It just, like, the lenses were just like the perfect match to me for the South Side. And then kind of, the blue side. It's like I really, because Abe and I we were both camera assistants in the 90s, right? The early 90s. And like everyone's using like the ultra speeds, they're using Tobacco 2s, like Traffic, same thing. Like, you had Mexico was warm. And so like, but it hadn't been done in a long time, like the 90s is now 30 years ago, which is kind of crazy to think. So I was like, well, let's just take what we know, like what we grew up doing, and take these lenses and make this, like the look of the show, and it'll seem almost like it's new, like because it just, like we're just recycling what we know, like what we came up with using.
And Abe, do you wanna jump in on since we're talking about the equipment and the looks of the show, the two different looks?
Yeah, well, Glenn and I were definitely even when we got the job. I mean, I came in through the showrunner, co-showrunner, writer, producer, David Shanks, who I'd worked with on The Chi, and I've already shot in Chicago, and coming over to 61st Street, which I love street photography. I am like addicted to it. I'm constantly shooting and testing. So when Glenn and I were talking about looks, and as we had that year wait, we're talking about Tobacco, for sure, coming from knowing Glenn's work and what he's been a part of, even 8 Mile, and really some bold looks, what he's got to be a part of. I knew about the Tobacco, but the things that were different for me is kind of the hands-on approach. I was stuck for 7 months in New Orleans, waiting for my show to start back up. And I had forgot who sent it to me, but I had the Tobacco filters shipped out to me. I did some testing, and I was using the Black Magic color space. And I took that Tobacco, which is basically baked in, and I did a lot of color work in terms of like pulling out the Tobacco look. And I did notice on the skin tones how it did, if I could retain some in the skin tones. But I know on 61st Street, we had our Tobacco filter in, and Glenn had shot some tests. And again, I did some digital lab work, or, my own kind of work at home. After he shot the test, or after while he was shooting the pilot, I had Mickey, our loader, send me some frame grabs that were raw. And I kind of reverse engineered the look that he was creating in real time as I was watching dailies, because I think a lot of times is to know how the light's reacting. So I took the raw image, and put the look back in Lightroom. And then that kind of informed me what I was getting into in terms of, how the light's going to react on certain colors. So I very much, in terms of my workflow, I work from a photographer perspective into like, these are contact sheets. And so when you get the frame grabs that are in log or raw, I'm able to pack that look back in to see what Glenn was doing and how he was lighting as I was watching dailies. So for me, it felt like it was a lot more intensive research, coming up with the blue, coming up with the tones of the show. So it enabled me to talk to wardrobe, and at least particular to some of my episodes or episodes as I'm doing, prepping a episode with the director or production design, who's a great production designer that was building the world that we're doing for 61st Street, which has so much realism, locations that I love so much.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like making the story feel realistic for the audience, because the look of it, the bold look and the color really draws you into the story, but it also feels very realistic at the same time. How did you achieve that in this series, like making it feel realistic? I mean, in terms of the locations and doing justice to the production design.
I mean, we shot in the South Side of Chicago. Like we were one of the few like the location managers like we never shoot here. Like it's all David Wolf in Chicago mostly. Like, and no one wants to go here. It's not safe. But like we immersed ourselves in the community. Like tried to like we shot in there's almost, I mean, the apartment is a stage, right? Like her apartment's a stage. There's like, and the courthouse is a stage. I mean, it's like one of the biggest sets I've ever been in my life. And I've worked on Titanic, is the courthouse, but so like those are the two stages, her house and Franklin's house, and everything else is location. Like everything else is on the, and 90% of it's on the south side of Chicago. So, we took, and we did all the South Side handheld, like, and we tried to make it feel like you were there, like that was the whole point. It's just, like, and we used, a lot of the background are from the South Side of Chicago, like we used a lot of our, like our camera. We had a program that would use people who were from the South Side, they would become camera people or, like anything in the business. So like we tried to integrate ourselves into that culture, to give it a look. And like Marta, who's the first director, she's a Black female, and she tried to also, like help Peter with the script, who's a white male, like who wrote the scripts, like, to meld them together to try to get you, like, he has got the cop thing down, right? He's got the lawyer thing down. So then we would bring in directors to try to, to bring up the South Side up, right? So like, I think it was a good mixture between having Peter and then like an African-American director or, someone who knows more like about the South Side, and it just worked out pretty well.
And I also want to talk, I mean, both of you guys feel free to jump in on this, but we got to talk about the camera movement, of course, and how that plays into the storytelling. And there are a lot of moments where you're moving closer to actors to point the audience to their emotions. And I thought the action scenes were really interesting, the way the camera movement played into the storytelling when someone's running or being chased. Can you talk a little bit more, both of you, about the camera movement in terms of the visual language for the show?
Yeah, I mean, Abe and I come from like run and gun. Like that's like, he did documentaries. Like we went to Africa and Ali, and Abe went back and taught kids how to become filmmakers. I mean, he was so moved by the people there. Like Abe is like, he's from the, like, he literally like takes people from the street and moves them up. And like, that's what he does with the camera. And like from his philosophy and my philosophy, that's like, if you see this here, like that's how we would do running. And we also, like Abe has all like the little gadgets, like the black magic. And you can talk about this too, Abe, like, and we just, incorporated like the black magic with the lenses, like the lenses worked on it. And, like, and we would run and gun, like we'd have our camera operator, Chris Cuevas, who's a great camera operator, would just like follow him around with the black magic, for all this running stuff, anything that we could do to make, the camera feel as if it's part of it. Yeah, like this is like, that did a lot of the running. And you can speak to this too, Abe.
Yeah, I really admire. I think really my muscles were stretched with Glenn and Chris and Billy, Chris and Billy Wynn, our dolly grip. I felt like I was really being stretched in terms of camera movement because of the natural place where Glenn comes from with Jimmy Barrow as a mentor. And I actually carried it over to National Treasure, which we still have, you know, Dominic Barloni, who comes from that same vein from the Michael Mann world in terms of camera movement. But there's something that's interesting with this run and gun idea is I love handheld. To me, that's about as street as it gets with street photography. But I think when I was watching the dailies with Glenn and our A team, which by the way, we had the most amazing camera grip electric team that were very consistent workflow that was able to move very fast and be nimble and really put the camera anywhere. And just our camera team was super wizards with the camera gear. And I just never felt any resistance or challenge from them in terms of getting the camera set up the way we needed. So to me, it offered a lot of freedom to either in the handheld space or having cranes, because it's a show that we definitely were unlimited with movement. But I just really followed what Glenn was trying to do in some places. But then, yes, he's right. In the documentary space, the truthfulness, I really try to lean into getting the locations that were hitting the light in the right spot so we can inevitably put camera into positions where if it's smaller, they just give you a point of view. This shows very much, I think, for the most part, what really dictated was the point of view of our character and what the specific scene was calling for. And to me, that was what really was the primary place for camera movement, is to how do you go through this journey from these 2 points of view? Not only are you being told it or feeling it when you're watching by the color, but you're also where the camera placement is. And I think from the blocking onward, this different points of view what the director may want, points of view with the characters, because we had to deal with a lot of sensitive issues in terms of our story. So where the camera placement was, where we were shooting it. Sometimes the idea of it to fill these tight spaces was a great way to make it have such a sense of realism, because we were in very tight spaces and we're shooting. It really comes through in this large format and the space. And plus these lenses, the light transmission was just so pure and clean and consistent, and the flares were consistent. So this show needed to have that kind of consistency from our technicians and our crew, and in terms of story making, because I felt that's something that we needed that the show definitely needed, is to have a consistency, because sometimes things could change, we lose a location, and we have to be really quick on our feet. And having a consistent workflow is very important to us in terms of how fast you move. And we were challenged by having 10-hour days, even before the pandemic happened. And I felt like our entire camera package from top down and the crew that we had was very, very consistent. So with that consistency, offered a lot of freedom in terms of what we could do with that camera.
You know, I saw a lot of that when I was watching the pilot. One of the questions that came to me too is there's a lot of setups, and I think that's where your consistency that's where my question comes from, is what was the conversation between the two of you to just have that many different looks going on, all even in the pilot? I mean, there's a lot of coordination and making sure that comes through. And I imagine, well, let me ask the question: how, did you guys get together and say, okay, the kids are going to have this, and the cops will be this way, and all of the different setups that I would assume are going to be character through lines throughout the series? Was that a conscious choice between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Marta and I, were the director. We're on, like, we'd call each other once a week for a year, and we really dug through every line of the script, we had all scripts. We had all 16 scripts from before the COVID. They were all written. So we had, yes, they changed, there was a little bit of a change. Some characters became more important than others, but, you could go through and track the story all the way through to the end, through season 2, through the end of the series. So, we had, Abe and I had a year to figure out, okay, so if we make it look like, we know where it's going. And then Marta and I, for the pilot, I mean, we, like I said, we had a long time to prep, but we would sit and we're like, how do we shoot each scene with one shot, right? how do you tell the story through the person? Like we were shooting it through like, so this scene's through Moses's eyes, right? So like it's always going to be through Moses, or it's going to be through the brother, or it's going to be through the mother, right? You know, like our ingenue or Courtney. So like every scene that they're in, it's through one of their eyes, right? So that's what we had discussed. So like we would, you know, like we would read the scene, and like we were lucky to have amazing actors that would help us, you know, with this vision as well. Like, so how do we, you know, like how do we do one shot to tell the whole story, you know? And then, you know, we almost basically shot it that way. Like some days, like the pilot, we would have 5 setups in a day with 4 locations.
Wow.
You know, so like we would, you know, like everyone was not necessarily happy with us, you know, because that's not what studios want. Like AMC wasn't very happy, and even Peter would sometimes be like, I don't know if this is right, you know, like, but we're like, you're gonna be happy, like, you know, like we can see the show in the end, you know, like there was a lot of fighting, you know, like through it was a lot. It wasn't easy to get that made, but you know, and it somehow it kind of stuck, right? You know, like some directors of course would do more than others, you know, like, and like you know, like sometimes like you know, you don't get as much control as you want as a DP, you know, like sometimes you want to, honestly, like you feel like when you're the cameraman, you know, like you want to walk in and you're the cinematographer, your job is to tell the story with the camera, and you want to do that, but you get your hands tied behind your back because the director doesn't want to tell the story the way, you know, you tell the story, and the studio doesn't want, you know, they want a different version, and then, you know, like AMC wants a whole nother version than Peter's, you know, so like you're kind of stuck in the middle, but you know, like, and you have to please everyone, but you really are trying, like, you know, like I said, at least on the pilot, I really push forward, like, this is what we're giving you. And like, you know, if we don't make it, it's fine, you know, but it ended up working out, you know, and then the later episodes, they changed a little bit, but you know, we still stuck to the look as best we could.
No, it was really nice. I was just, what really caught my attention was how much effort was given to really setting that up in the pilot. I mean, it was very clear that we were in for a really intricate story, and you know, as a viewer, I really appreciated that. It heightened my feeling of this, of wanting to share with those characters.
Yeah.
And Glenn, could you just describe for the audience that might not have seen the show yet, can you describe a little bit about what the story means to you without giving any major spoilers away?
Yeah, I mean, when I read the first script, I was like, this is like one of the better scripts I've ever read. You know, like I'd be so lucky to do this show, you know, because it's especially at the time, like COVID even made it more real, right? So it's about a black teen, you know, who is a track star ready to go to college from the South Side, you know, who, you know, accidentally kills a police officer, you know, because it's all the setup, and then, you know, like he, you know, the rest of the show is trying to get him free, you know, like, but you know, because it's an act, you know, like it's just like that's what their life is like. It's like and we were in the South Side, so you know, it's very true to life. Like why we were there, you know, a young black kid was shot in the back running away, who was 14 years old, who did nothing wrong, you know, so
Right.
like you know, there was more than one of those incidences why we were there in Chicago, you know, on the South Side. So like it's a real, you know, it's not a true story, but you know, it's true to life. So reading the script, I was like, you know, we knew this was like true to life. So like, so this story needs to be, you know, it just needs to be more mainstream. Like this stuff needs to be like, it's not, you know, criminals and cops. It's like the criminals aren't the criminals, you know, like, and the cops may be the criminal, you know, like there's a lot, but this is, you know, we really try, you know, the script really tried to be realistic, and that's what made it appealing to me.
Yeah, Abe, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about why this story is important to you?
There were so many things that were meaningful for me. I would definitely say we're kind of bent to some social justice here in the storytelling process. So you know, my experience is totally different in terms of in real life experience. And growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood that definitely had gangs and lowriders, is more of a Latino base. And just navigating your way in the neighborhood is a definitely interesting thing, because you can I felt that in our story when you're just basically want to just walk to the grocery store or something, and how you navigate in the street and people who you look out for. And to me, in almost in all the work that I do, I try to break the script down in terms of people's gifts. And here we had, our lead actor who ran track, and I ran track as well. And so there was a lot of touchstones that are similar to when you have communities with disparity. So for me, it was a very much a personal thing with, there's in the neighborhood where I'm from, it's school district's very bad, a lot of redlining, and the school systems aren't so great, and really trying to how you navigate that world when you're just on the cusp of going to college. So same thing for me. I went to college for the first time in my family, and I felt there was a lot of issues. And I think with track, my mom moved to another neighborhood, and I saw how the teachers responded if you had that gift and in terms of pouring into you as a student. So for this story overall, I mean, this is Chicago. It's raw and it's real, and that's where we shot, as Glenn mentioned. So for me, I really wanted to not get in the way as much and to really listen to the realism that happened in the neighborhood, or from our team. It was a very much localized team, and how we're trying to integrate the community. So in that regard, I feel very, very lucky to have been a part of the show. So when I read the script and saw what Glenn was doing, the pilot, and Marta, our pilot director, it just kept getting really better. And it was such a sensitive issue, like just coming out of the pandemic, your heart's really raw. And that's kind of the space I was in, with just really getting the script moving forward throughout, shooting 2 seasons back to back. So for me, shooting track and shooting like all the nuances that may happen in the neighborhood that we try to put emphasis on is really amazing. And plus making it such a heightened situation. I think literally one of my favorite shots is just TV period is that what Glenn did it's like from the inside the train with him running. I think there was, to me, that shot was the most compelling. It just had so much scope that he's running block after block in the train, and that to me was a way to catapult that story. It's just so electric and just so good. And I'm like, this is our show. I couldn't believe it, what Glenn was doing, and to come on the heels of that, I just felt so honored to be a part of this process with Glenn.
Nice. A quick question from our Q&A from Deborah Fleming. As we're talking about the complexity of the setups and the different scenes that you were trying to establish, were there any scenes that just did not match with the story and script? And if so, how did you proceed with that scene?
Yeah, I mean, first you try to get it off the script. Like you do read the scripts, like, you can ask, like, you have like you have 4 weeks of prep with the director. And so like you try to get those scenes, like you try to talk to Peter, and like a lot of them did go away. Like you'd read the script, like if you read all the scripts, like you're pretty trusted as a cameraman as to what's going to work and not work. Like nowadays, like you have a director that maybe he's done 1 or 2 shows, like, you do get inexperienced directors now. It's like there's so much work. That's just the way it is. So as a cameraman, you start, like Abe and I have over 30 years of experience each, right? So like you could be the most experienced person in the room, and not even thinking it that way, right? So like, we don't think of it that way, Abe. Like we're just a couple of kids who happen to be cameramen, but it turns out that you've just worked on more stuff than anyone else has because you've just been around. So then like, they look to you. So like you can get a scene, you're like, okay, this scene is not going to work. You can just read it. You can just read that the scene's not going to work. And that worked 80% of the time. That would work. And then there's other times no matter how bad the scene is, these actors were so amazing. All of them were just, like we had literally top-notch actors. Every single one of them was amazing. And all the sets were pretty much real. So you put them in a real set, and like, if you have a rough idea, okay, they're going to stand here, they're going to go there, you're going to go here. You just do your best to like, watch them and film it. And then like, you have let's say a day factor that's not good or whatever. So then like, okay, so let's just play the scene on the other actor, like let's put the focus on the main actor and not see the other actor as much, or make a wider shot. So like, you're not, you can cut in and out of his dialogue, like if that's, like another way of doing it. It's just like, if someone's not working out as well, just try to keep the camera off them, and keep their dialogue on the other side of camera, off camera,
Right.
or, like that seems to work, best in those scenarios. But like, as long as you have great actors, a good director, and you have a location, it'll work itself out. Like, and the actors really will tell you where to put the camera. Like, they have an understand, like, if you're just watching them act, you're like, okay, the camera needs to go here to get that reaction. The camera goes here for that reaction. We know if we like, if we move them slightly, we don't have to move the lights, like, because we have 10 hours to shoot the scene, which is really 9.5 hours, right? So like, it all pretty much, it'll work itself out.
Great. All along that too, and thank you for that. It's dealing with the complexity. When we're looking at those BTS shots, it looks like you had several different camera packages, different types of cameras that you were. Was there an attempt to match the LUTs, or were they chosen for specific design characteristics?
Oddly enough, we got the mini LFs and the Black Magic. Abe has a connection with Black Magic and was able to get the Mini Pocket Pro 6K. And with the LUT on it, we couldn't tell the difference at our HD monitors. We could not tell the difference between the LF and with the same lenses and because our LUT was so contrasty. We had like
Right.
like, you're taking all the curve out of it, right? Like, like it's not go, like it's going to blow out and it's going to be too dark on one side. So the Black Magic matched perfectly. And we had so much driving stuff and so much stuff in a car. And we, like, you're doing an injustice if you're not driving in Chicago when you're shooting in Chicago. Like, why would you, like, you're just like, why would you use a screen when you're in Chicago? And
Right.
the show it's in a police car. Like, why would you not use the thing? So we would just place those cameras. We had 2 Black Magics and 2 LFs, and we'd use the LFs inside, and then we put the Black Magics on the outside. Or if we had to do running or something, and we never. I mean, it all looked the same.
Awesome. The versatility that provides must have made it a lot easier, especially if you're driving around Chicago. I know that challenge. I've tried it once or twice.
Yeah, we were all through the South Side in a car. Like I said, half the episodes are in a car.
Awesome.
Sorry, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Tom.
No, go ahead. Please do.
Someone was asking in the chat if it was what you consider when you're approaching shooting a car scene. If you want to talk about 61st Street specifically, or in general, if you guys could talk about that a little bit, how to execute.
I can tackle this one. There's a lot of moving parts with car work, whether you're doing day or night. So a lot of times pay attention to, I think we're talking technically here is just paying attention to tint and pick points on the camera. I mean, between the camera and the car work for practical shooting. So I definitely pay attention to the tint, the route, and, trying to add a sense of realism even on the practical work of the light. But I think the range, these cameras, the lenses, and we did have an aggressive LUT, which was great because I very much am fueled by it. But I would constantly check log or raw and just kind of check the zones there. And that, to me, because I really like the contrast of these lenses and the performance. I like really dark blacks. They're just smudgy and inky. So to me, it was so much fun working it. But the night work and the car work, you just have to, monitor that a little bit more on a practical level. So I think it's best always to set up testing and just taking a look where your range is, because you may turn one side, different parts of the street. Maybe they might stop in the middle of the street, and there we might have some lifts and condors, or lights coming from the roof. So there was a lot of planning and figuring out the route. So in this specific, definitely for 61st Street, I spent a lot of time in that 4-week prep dealing with the schedule. because the whole time when you're working with the schedule, before you even get to the car work, is to set yourself and your team up for success and safety. And to me, I think we were really stretched because sometimes we wouldn't get roads that we were promised, and it gets so frustrating because you're committing to something and you find on the day if something changes. So you just really got to stay fluid when it comes to the car work, because the thing I like about street photography and what it informs me is the naturalism. I did a lot of testing on the street of different color temps, and now with LED and our gaffer and key grip were just so stellar, and it had very much a localized language that maybe someone for me who shoots all over the place coming into here, really paying attention to those details on my own on the street photography world. So to building into that color palette, so that's really what you're diving into. So a lot of times we're on foot or bikes or cars, and to me, having the range and color palette to augment what's out there in Chicago is something you start on the prep. So a lot of times I would just really go out with my I shoot Fujifilm, and I really just go out and would do some test shots at night and just really how to augment the scene where it takes place, that I try to convince the director what areas to go through. So having to have a clear mind of the locations and the street routes you pick, I think is probably the most important thing, other than the hardware around the car, and also the story that you're trying to make safely at the same time. And we definitely had our battles in that. But like Glenn said, there's so much give and take. It's constantly a tug of war of what you're trying to do. And this is a visual medium. We're trying to tell a story visually. And like Glenn mentioned, after years and years of experience, we've seen it all. And to convey a trust of an incoming director who maybe, it has a one-sided approach to it, there's the other practical things that may, have a diminishing return for us if it doesn't work out. So I think the stakes are pretty high when you're shooting in a very much in a city like Chicago that's in real time, with blocking the streets. So I think for me, definitely an aggressive prep with the ADs and running the route and just going over and over of who's in the cars and what's happening where everybody is.
Yeah, and Abraham, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, since we're talking about prep, is your tech scouts. I heard that you use some ZEISS lenses for that.
Yes. So Glenn mentioned I did move to Nairobi, Kenya, and when I sold my house, I mentioned being a prep tech and a camera tech. I've run through a lot of ZEISS. I purchased, I had to bring a lens set with me to Kenya, and I worked with all that work, some of the work with Shane, and started shooting 5D and had a lot of support. So I bought some cameras and lenses, and I chose ZEISS ZF lenses. I talked to Paul Duclos, who I've known forever, like when he was like in a broom closet at Isaiah, and he would service our lenses. I was working for a sports commercial DP, and when you're working in the doco space, you don't have really a G&E team. You're like all over the planet, unless we do studio work for celebrities. But I really folded into these ZEISS lenses because in terms of going, the contrast levels, it's almost like literally no flares on these lenses. It's about a purest light transmission you can get. There's no autofocus. It's all manual, declicked iris. And I use these lenses other than shooting some indie movies or some projects in Kenya, which really inform me a lot on skin tone. Because when you're in Nairobi in East Africa, you will have crew members from Sudan, Somalia. You have a wide range of skin tones, and I think with my Kenya grip electric lighting team, really informed me the range of skin tone, even more so that I even seen here in the States. And I do a lot of pan Latino projects too with various skin tones. And to me, the ZEISS ZF lenses have been very instrumental in my stills work. Because sometimes I just go shoot stills. I mean, I still shoot stills. It can be fashion. It could be, I still love it. But most of it's street photography because it informs the realism to what I do on these shows. So from every show I've ever done, I have my ZEISS CFs with me and I test it. So I use it on every show, whether it's a crash camera or I just throw these lenses on. It's like a perfect fit. It doesn't, because it doesn't flare. I think that the flare informs you a lot of a disconnect if you have many different, I mean, I know it's kind of on trend right now to have different lenses and whatever the story process is. I like the information to come into me and the light transmission to come as pure as possible. So I take these ICFs on all my tech scouts, especially like National Treasure. The cool thing is when you're rotating DP, you might be able to set up a look for a different territory. And so I constantly have a color chart, and I shoot of the space, take a picture with my cameras, medium format, Fujifilm, and I take pictures of it in focus, out of focus, and I actually show and sometimes send it to the clothing department, wardrobe, and production design. I said, this is the space I want to feel for, let's say the Mexico look in National Treasure, or the caper in Memphis at Elvis. So I try to use that information, because it might not be the primary lens on the main package, but what it does is it informs me in color and how the background focuses in and out, especially a show like Lincoln Lawyer or whatever it may be. These IZFs travel with me everywhere. It's my personal kit. You even see it on my medium format camera. I also have lens mounts. I also change that around for color space. But yeah, this is very instrumental. It's like my heart. It's my personal choice lenses. I do anything with them. I know them so well.
Well, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, those classics have a storied history. I appreciate them as well. So it's nice to know they're out there still getting some use. So awesome.
And, yeah, I wanted to ask Glenn a little bit about flares as well. Can you talk about the looks that you created with the radiance lenses and how the flares played into the storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously, that's the reason to get the lens, right? I mean, like, that's one of the main, they're not coated, so they have, they flare. They also, like, if you have a window, one of the two reasons for the flare. One is like no flare when it's on a window, it'll blow the window out for you, so like if you're on stage, like, and you add a little light to window because there's no coating, the window will blow out, so it'll look less like stage. So it's slightly helpful there. And then, like, we were outside in Chicago, right, on the south side, and so we could use the lenses to have the sun, the sun hit the light, the lens to make to see flares, like, and it worked real well to be in real world. Like, we knew we were going to be outside, like the show's outside, and a lot of it takes place in the day, so like, we knew we'd be able to use those lenses were great, just to give a look. And then I also, right after 61st Street, I went on to Tom Swift, which is another African American show, and it was set like, like supposed to be futuristic. So, I'm like, well, I'm just going to use these. I took the same lenses, from 61st Street onto that show. And, future, like, we would point lights, flashlights in the lenses, like in the, to give it like a full, like, sci-fi look, kind of like what they did on like Star Trek, right? Like when you see what's his name shooting like the light into the lens, like we were doing the same thing on Tom Swift, and they still hold, like, a lot of lenses will blow out or completely glow, like, so you don't see any image, but you can shine a flashlight right off into the lens and you'll still see the image. Like, you still see the person's face, you can still see the background, but you just get a beautiful flare. So like, it's the perfect way of not completely destroying the whole image, but having, an artifact in there that's, that to me that looks beautiful.
Yeah, Abraham just recently came by and got to talk to David more about the development of the radiance lenses and our
that's cool.
Star blue anti-reflective coating. That's what makes it different from the regular Supremes and what gives you that beautiful blue flare. So I'm happy to hear that you use the lenses again. That's really cool.
Yeah.
No, we appreciate that. We are about out of time. I didn't know if there was any last comments you guys wanted to make. Tell us what you're working on next.
Well, hopefully we have a job coming soon now that the writer's strike is over. So we're hoping that SAG is able to make a deal soon enough, so there will be a project coming next. I think Abe should be coming here to Atlanta, hopefully soon, if it all works.
Yeah, I just finished a show is coming out soon, Obliterated, which I want to tag on to this too. It's coming out on Netflix, which is a very fun color contrast show for me. I just went crazy with it, had fun. It was a good fun time. Yeah, that's right. I have some boxing projects in my future, so I ended up taking Cobra Kai. I love that team over there, so I'm really looking to expand my range in combat fighting and shooting. So I'm kind of midstream on that. Our show shut down, so I'm really into I've been shooting some stills again with my ZEISS, like boxing. I've been keeping busy trying to shoot boxing, like in the ring down at the casinos here in LA. So I'm constantly testing. So I'm really excited about the things that we're going to be doing in terms of the fight. You know, we have gimbals and testing and stabilization. So I'm running a lot of tests currently. But that's where Glenn and I met. We met on Ali, and I think we did a lot of groundbreaking things on that show. And there's such a sense of realism and truthfulness that, but still technically very, very technical. And, so I feel like that boxing project it's going to be it's going to be a very heartfelt story that we're going to be shooting in the future. Hopefully this movie takes off, but I'm currently in my mindset's there at the moment, into the sports and tournaments and so on.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks to both of you for sitting with us this afternoon. A lot of great conversation, and we do, a lot of great talk about the craft, and I'm looking forward to more of the episodes of 61st Street, and then additional work. And like Glenn, like I said, if you're around next week, we'll be at Cine Gear Atlanta down at Trilith Studios. We'll be happy to have you come by. We'll talk some gear and some new stuff that we're working on. Abraham, as always, great to meet you. I'm glad you can make it by the showroom. And yeah, good luck to you, gentlemen. Thanks again for stopping. My team, Anna, thank you very much for giving us all the questions. And David, love to see you again on screen. We'll try to get back in the same place again real soon. Thanks, everyone. Thanks to our audience. And have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.